there was new video released yesterday showing Nick Reiner calmly strolling near his parents' home hours before the murders. This was obtained by the New York Post. Let's take a look at it. It's video 1. It's just a sidewalk. This is just him walking. For the listening audience, he has a bag over his left shoulder. He's walking calmly.
5 days have passed since the heartbreaking tragedy at the Brentwood home of Rob Reiner and his wife Michelle, whose lives were taken in a shocking act that stunned Hollywood. New details are now emerging, and each revelation makes the story even more unsettling. A preliminary forensic report suggests the exact moment when Nick Reiner may have struck, describing multiple severe injuries, including one deep wound across Rob's neck that investigators say carried a chilling message: "Shut up. Say nothing more." Every new piece of evidence seems to reveal a darker layer of pain and chaos. Authorities believe the tragedy might have begun with a heated confrontation at Conan O'Brien's Christmas party, where witnesses noticed Nick acting erratic and unstable. What started as an argument reportedly spiraled into something unthinkable. Afterward, Nick allegedly left the scene in eerie calm, checked into a nearby hotel, and later used family inheritance money to hire Alan Jackson, one of the nation's most powerful defense lawyers, to take his case.
This nigga used his inheritance money from his father for a lawyer to represent him, that he's being accused of killing his father. So he's using his father's own money to represent him after killing his own father. Man, this is crazy. Yeah, they say he slit his throat. That's some wild shit. And he must have did that shit fast too, like, cause he killed both his parents, slit both their throats. That's what they saying.
Move that's left people speechless, wondering how someone could act with such cold resolve. Investigators are now piecing together the timeline of events from that night, beginning with the tense dinner that seems to have triggered everything. According to the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office, the attack took place sometime between midnight and the early morning hours, marking one of the most haunting nights in recent memory. Between roughly midnight and 6 a.m., investigators believe Nick quietly left his own room and entered the main house, where his parents were asleep in the master bedroom. There were no signs of forced entry. He already had the keys and knew every corner of that home like the back of his hand. What happened next remains the most chilling part of this case. After the violent act,
Doesn't look irate, doesn't look out of his mind, looks kind of normal. He's walking past the gas station with a hat. He has not yet murdered anybody, allegedly.
Nick reportedly left the house almost immediately, carrying with him either a wave of panic or a disturbing calmness that only he could explain. Around 4 a.m., security records show Nick arriving at the Pierside Hotel in Santa Monica, just a 20-minute drive from Brentwood. He checked into a modest room, paying quietly in cash or by card, barely noticed by staff. During those hours, no one saw him make calls or even sleep, as if he were lost in a haze, detached from the chaos he had left behind. Later that same day, around 3:40 p.m., the terrible discovery was made. A massage therapist arrived for an appointment with Rob and Michelle, but got no response at the door. Worried, she phoned Roy, who rushed over with her boyfriend. The moment they opened the door, their worlds shattered. Rob was found lifeless in the master bedroom, and panic set in as 911 was called immediately. Police soon arrived and located Michelle nearby, confirming everyone's worst fears. While investigators processed the heartbreaking scene, Nick was still on the move.
A drink at a gas station moments before he was arrested. This is an ABC News video. Here he is. Once again, he's got a bag over his left shoulder, it appears, and he's kind of meandering around a convenience store, and again, does not look out of his mind, deranged, in any way disturbed. This is after, again, the murder.
By around 9 p.m., a surveillance camera at an Arco gas station near Exposition Park caught him buying a sports drink, looking restless and scanning the area, yet oddly composed enough to finish the transaction. Just minutes later, at approximately 9:15 p.m., LAPD officers, with help from the U.S. Marshals, surrounded and detained him nearby. He offered no resistance and stayed silent as he was taken into custody. The footage showed a young man with a hollow, exhausted stare, as if drained of all emotion. Forensic teams later determined determined that Rob and Michelle had likely passed away 3 to 4 hours before being found based on early signs observed by responders. It was a timeline that deepened the tragedy and left investigators searching for answers about what truly pushed Nick to that breaking point. Investigators suggested that Nick may have tried to clean himself up before leaving the scene or even showered later at the hotel. Still, traces of evidence could have remained on his clothes or skin, and surveillance footage captured his movements through Santa Monica that morning. Experts believe the weapon used was likely something taken from inside the home. An everyday kitchen knife or even a cleaver, something easily within reach. Because Nick knew the layout of the house so well, authorities say he was able to move with chilling precision, turning a once warm and familiar home into a scene of chaos and sorrow.
One more video I want to show you. This is of him surrendering on an LA street as the cops corner him. This is a little harder to see, but you can see a bit. Hold on. Where do we get this? Oh, this is from the New York Post. Okay. The law enforcement has since said he went into custody willingly. He didn't resist arrest.
Reports describe a shocking number of injuries found in the bedroom, revealing the sheer level of violence that had unfolded. Forensic investigators later confirmed that both Rob and Michelle suffered multiple serious wounds, disproving early reports that mentioned only a single strike. The truth painted a far more disturbing picture. Professor Joseph Scott Morgan, a leading forensic expert from Jacksonville State University, explained that repeated stabbing usually reflects a clear and deliberate intent, as well as the use of immense physical force. Such acts occur at extremely close range, requiring the attacker to invade the victim's personal space and use significant energy. The sheer repetition of the injuries in this case made experts describe the assault as sustained and deeply intentional. Morgan further broke down the technical aspects. Stab wounds tend to be deeper and more focused, while slash wounds are longer but shallower. When both appear together, it suggests...
Yeah. You stabbing somebody, you really trying to... You slashing, you ain't really giving a fuck. You ain't trying to kill him, but when you stab a motherfucker, you really trying to kill him. So, they say he stabbed him multiple times.
An extended struggle filled with rage and precision, rather than a sudden emotional snap. This wasn't a brief loss of control. It was a calculated series of moves showing both force and determination. From a forensic standpoint, experts clarified that such neck injuries are rarely as quick or clean as Hollywood movies make them seem. In reality, it requires control, physical strength, and close contact, making the entire act especially chilling. The way this tragedy unfolded shows just how deliberate and methodical the attack must have been, leaving behind a trail of heartbreak that continues to haunt everyone involved. These latest findings bring even more weight and heartbreak to the final moments of Rob and Michelle Reiner, sending shockwaves through their family and the public alike.
Hold on a sec. You can see the cops. You can't really see the defendant at this point. He's behind the car, but you can see the cops are not in like a terror stance that we sometimes see when somebody resists or pulls away.
A year ago, the couple killed their daughter, buried her body.
What makes it even harder to process are early reports suggesting the couple may have been lying in bed when the attack began. If true, it would mean the person responsible had intimate knowledge of the home, from the layout of the bedrooms to the couple's nightly routines and how easily they might wake up. Experts say an attack from such close range, possibly even while the victims were asleep, reflects a total invasion of personal space. The idea that the attacker may have climbed onto the bed to carry out the assault is horrifying enough to make anyone shiver. Forensic specialists describe the scene as overwhelming. The injuries to the neck caused severe bleeding, and with additional stab wounds, the loss of blood was catastrophic. Every piece of evidence pointed to one disturbing truth. The attacker knew the home intimately and could enter without suspicion, leading investigators straight to Nick Reiner, the third person living under that roof. Even more unsettling is what happened after. The man accused of ending his parents' lives reportedly used part of their own inheritance to pay for his defense, a fact that stunned the public and raised ethical questions across the nation. People immediately began asking how much could this defense possibly cost? Because Nick didn't have a steady career of his own and his past work mostly came from small film projects with his father years ago. though, the source of the funds drew even more scrutiny. Alan Jackson, the attorney representing him, is not just any lawyer. He's one of the most sought-after defense attorneys in the country, known for taking on only the most complex and high-profile cases. His reputation alone carries a massive price tag. Reports say that even when Jackson offered reduced rates in previous cases, total legal costs still reached around $10 million. For many watching this case unfold, that number symbolizes the staggering privilege and contradiction at the heart of this tragedy. A son accused of unspeakable violence now defending himself with the wealth built by the very people he's accused of hurting. In Nick's case, the costs are expected to skyrocket even higher due to the gravity of the charges and the non-stop media attention surrounding every update. Even at a reduced rate, the expenses would still reach levels far beyond what most people could ever afford. When reporters questioned Alan Jackson outside the courthouse, he kept his response brief, saying only that he couldn't discuss who was paying the fees. That silence set off a storm of speculation. Rumors quickly spread. Some suggested Jackson might be taking the case pro bono because of its public visibility, while others whispered about possible behind-the-scenes deals. But then, on December 18th, 2025, multiple insiders close to the Reiner family dropped a shocking revelation. The legal fees are reportedly being covered by the estate of Rob and Michelle Reiner, valued at around $200 million. According to these sources, the decision came from surviving relatives like...
This nigga Rob was filthy rich, man. That nigga was filthy rich, yo. So yeah, his siblings, that's who in charge of the estate now. They're paying for their brother's legal fees, man. That's some real shit right there. A lot of siblings, if you killed their parents, if one of their siblings killed their parents, like a lot of the other siblings are not gonna pay for their brother. A lot of people won't do that, so that's big. That's big.
Jake and Roy Reiner. Despite their heartbreak, they decided to fund Nick's defense with the hope of pursuing a case based on mental instability and diminished responsibility. They reportedly believe that if Nick is placed in a secure psychiatric facility rather than serving a life sentence, it would be a more humane outcome. Possibly something Rob and Michelle themselves would have wished for their son. Under California law, a person convicted of taking someone's life cannot inherit from the victim's estate. However, the law does not prevent other family members or executors from using part of the estate to pay for legal defense before a verdict is reached. Legal analyst Sean Weisbart explained that this is technically allowed during ongoing proceedings, though it remains controversial. Others argue that the estate's executor could deny such payments to avoid legal backlash or potential disputes later on. As of now, neither the family nor the court has officially confirmed where the money is coming from, leaving fans and the public full of unanswered questions about loyalty, justice, and morality. Then came the next chapter, Nick Reiner's first courtroom appearance. Facing 2 counts of first-degree homicide and aggravating circumstances due to multiple victims, Nick was brought before the Los Angeles County Court wearing the standard blue inmate suit, a symbol of both safety and downfall. Representing him, as expected, was Alan Jackson, a powerhouse attorney known for defending some of the country's most high-profile clients. The hearing took place under strict conditions. No live cameras were allowed, adding to the growing mystery and public fascination surrounding the case. Attorney Jackson requested to delay the formal arraignment so Nick could decide whether to enter a plea. The judge agreed, rescheduling the next hearing for January 7th. For now, Nick remains in custody at the Los Angeles County Jail, awaiting the next step in a case that has already captured the attention of the entire nation. The only moment the public heard his voice was when he quietly responded to the judge, acknowledging his constitutional rights. A haunting reminder of how far this once privileged life had fallen. Mr. Reiner, do you waive your right to a speedy trial so that the arraignment may continue on January 7th, 2026? The judge asked. Nick's reply was short and nearly emotionless. Yes, Your Honor, I do. That was it. No explanation, no visible reaction, just a quiet acknowledgement that marked another step in this haunting case. The hearing ended almost as quickly as it began, leaving the courtroom tense and silent. Now all focus turns to January 7th. the date that could decide everything. The upcoming hearing has become the central point of attention for the media, the public, and the Reiner family, all of whom are desperate for answers. The cold, almost mechanical tone of the court appearance reminded everyone of one harsh truth. This case is far from over, and justice is only beginning to take shape. Before diving into what's expected to be a historic trial, investigators revisited one of the most disturbing threads in the story, Nick Reiner's long battle with addiction. Behind all the privilege and fame lay years of deep personal struggle that shaped the tragedy now unfolding. Born in 1993, Nick's descent into substance abuse began shockingly early. Around age 15, back in 2008, that was when he reportedly first experimented with hard drugs like heroin and cocaine, substances that sent his young life into a spiral that few could pull back from. Being the son of acclaimed director Rob Reiner and the grandson of Hollywood legend Carl Reiner, Nick grew up surrounded by fame, pressure, and expectation, a world that often felt alien and suffocating to him. His family saw the signs early on. Rob and Michelle, desperate to help, sent him to his first rehabilitation program while he was still a teenager. But that was only the beginning of a long, heartbreaking cycle of treatment and relapse. 17 or 18 rehab stints within just a few years, according to later accounts. Each time, Nick would show signs of progress, only to slip back into old habits soon after. It became a revolving door of hope and despair. Rob and Michelle never gave up. They poured their hearts into helping their son recover, offering emotional support, career opportunities, and even letting him move back into their Brentwood home to rebuild his life. Rob reportedly spent countless hours trying to guide Nick through creative projects, hoping structure and purpose might help him heal. But the struggle against addiction can be brutal, and Nick's recovery remained fragile. The very house meant to protect and restore him would later become the center of unimaginable tragedy.
Yeah, sometimes, man, you gotta let your kids go. They should have never let them back in the house. You gotta help them from a distance, man. Got to. Because if not, sometimes your own life could be at jeopardy. And in this case, that's what happened. That's what happened, man. So.
Rob once said that being a parent means never giving up on your child, no matter how far they fall. But in the Reiner's case, that love ended in tragedy, when the very son they protected for years became the one accused of taking their lives. When Rob and Michelle eventually tried a tougher approach, what friends called tough love, Nick decided to walk away and live on his own terms. He drifted from state to state, Maine, New Jersey, Texas, living a harsh and unstable life that he would later call his dark years. He nearly lost his life multiple times during that period, surviving only through luck and resilience. Homeless and disconnected, Nick relied on drugs and risky street connections to get by, sinking deeper into addiction as his family watched helplessly from afar. Then came a short-lived spark of hope. In 2015, at just 22 years old, Nick managed to stay sober long enough to collaborate with his father on the film Being Charlie, a semi-autobiographical story inspired by his own battles with addiction. For a while, it looked like redemption was possible. Father and son reconnected, working side by side and rebuilding some of the broken trust between them. But by 2018, things took a devastating turn. Nick relapsed again, this time more heavily than ever, falling back into heroin and nearly losing his life from a cocaine-induced medical emergency while on a flight. Not long after, he caused severe damage to his parents' guest house, smashing televisions, lights, and furniture in a haze of rage and confusion. That was the breaking point. Rob and Michelle had no choice but to send him back to rehab, hoping it might finally save him. By 2020, they let him move back into the Maine Brentwood house, trying once more to keep him close, supervised, and safe. But their hope was fading fast. Nick's behavior reportedly grew more erratic, and friends say the couple was deeply concerned about his mental health and ongoing substance issues in the months before the tragedy. Nick's story is a heartbreaking reminder that even the strongest love and endless support can't always stop someone's self-destruction. The case has left many wondering, could addiction play a role in his defense? Alan Jackson, Nick's high-profile attorney, is known for building meticulous legal strategies in cases that hinge on mental state and intent. Some insiders believe his defense may argue that Nick's prolonged drug use affected his ability to control his behavior that night. Witnesses at the Santa Monica Hotel described him as very high after the incident. a detail investigators have confirmed. But legally, that's not enough to claim insanity. In most cases, voluntary intoxication doesn't excuse responsibility. It can only slightly influence whether the accused had clear intent, a key factor in first-degree charges. However, if the defense can show that Nick's mind was impaired to the point of confusion rather than calculation, it might lessen the severity of the charge. Still, prosecutors argue that if someone retrieves a weapon and attacks after an argument, that clearly shows planning and awareness. So, while drug use might shape the narrative of his emotional state, it's unlikely to absolve him completely. The upcoming trial will test just how far this argument can go, and whether the line between addiction and accountability can ever truly be drawn. Nick's legal team faces steep challenges in the Reiner family case. Rob and Michelle's lives were taken with a knife, but investigators are still unsure whether Nick brought the weapon or grabbed one from inside the house that night. What is clear is that earlier tension and arguments suggest the possibility of some level of planning. Something prosecutors won't overlook. Even if drug use is raised as a mitigating factor, it holds very little legal weight under California law. If convicted of first-degree homicide with special circumstances, Nick could spend the rest of his life behind bars without the chance of parole. Without any proven mitigating conditions, the standard sentence could still range from 25 years to life. Authorities have found no evidence of self-defense or accidental harm. This appears to be what experts describe as a crime driven by emotion, anger, or passion. Adding to the gravity of the case is the fact that the victims were well-known Hollywood figures. The list of potential witnesses reportedly includes names like Conan O'Brien, Larry David, and Billy Crystal. People whose testimonies could turn this trial into a courtroom spectacle the world won't forget. Some analysts already predict that this could become one of the most widely followed legal battles in America. Since the O.J. Simpson or Menendez brothers trials, the trial is expected to begin in late 2026 or early 2027, and insiders believe a plea deal is unlikely. Prosecutor Nathan Hochman is expected to rely heavily on physical evidence, along with the broader narrative of what led to the tragedy, as he seeks to prove intent and planning beyond doubt. Every part of Nick's past, his addiction, mental state, and actions that night will be dissected in court, frame by frame. New forensic reports have also placed Nick directly at the scene, supported by DNA traces, blood evidence, and surveillance footage. These discoveries make it nearly impossible for the defense to argue self-defense, especially since Rob and Michelle were both elderly, while Nick was just 32. This imbalance makes the defense's task even harder to justify. In some rare situations, lawyers argue for lesser charges like manslaughter, which implies no intent to take a life. But in this case, the combination of the argument, the retrieved weapon, and the violent nature of the attack makes that claim very weak. Reports have even suggested that Rob and Michelle suffered severe neck injuries, an indicator of calculated close-range intent. If verified, that detail could dramatically strengthen the prosecution's case. Alan Jackson, leading the defense, now faces enormous pressure to construct any narrative that might reduce Nick's culpability. The exact positioning of the victims' bodies, the presence of home security recordings, and forensic mapping of the scene could all play decisive roles in what happens next. And then, of course, there's the question of how the jury will view Nick Reiner himself. A man born into extraordinary privilege, yet consumed by addiction and turmoil. In Los Angeles County, jurors come from all walks of life, many of whom might not relate to that level of wealth or opportunity. Will they see him as a victim of mental illness and addiction, or as someone who wasted every chance given to him? That question lingers as the trial approaches, one that could define not just Nick's fate, but how the public understands the limits of love, accountability, and redemption in the shadow of Hollywood's glittering lights. Conan O'Brien's annual Christmas party had always been one of Hollywood's most anticipated.
Yeah, man, I don't see him getting the insanity thing. Like, he tried slitting their necks, so obviously he was intentionally trying to kill them. So I don't know. I can't see that.
Gatherings, a night where stars could finally unwind, laugh, and mingle without the glare of cameras. Rob Reiner and his wife, Michelle Singer Reiner, were regulars at the event, but this particular year, things were different. They brought along their younger son, Nick. a decision that, in hindsight, carried heartbreaking significance. Those close to the family later revealed that Rob and Michelle had been deeply worried about Nick. His behavior in the months leading up to that night had become increasingly unstable. Late-night disappearances, sudden mood swings, and phone calls that left his parents sleepless and on edge. They didn't want to leave him alone, fearing what might happen if they did. Bringing him to the party felt like the safest choice. And maybe, just maybe, a joyful night surrounded by familiar faces could lift his spirits. Nick wasn't originally on the guest list, but Rob sent Conan a quick message explaining the situation. Conan, known for his kindness, immediately agreed. When the Reiners arrived, everything looked perfectly normal at first. Rob greeted old friends warmly, Conan welcomed them with open arms, and Michelle glowed in a dark, elegant dress that turned heads. But Nick's demeanor stood out. While the rest of the guests chatted cheerfully, Nick lingered in the background, wearing a worn gray hoodie with the hood pulled tight around his face. His eyes darted around the room, restless and uneasy, as if he was searching for something no one else could see. Guests soon began to notice his strange energy. According to several attendees, Nick started approaching people abruptly, asking odd and intrusive questions like, "What's your full name? Are you famous?" His tone was flat, his expression blank, but his stare was sharp and unsettling. Most guests tried to brush it off, replying politely before excusing themselves. Others exchanged nervous glances, whispering that the young man seemed off. Actress Jane Fonda later shared that she felt an unexplainable chill when Nick stood too close, staring without blinking. The most uncomfortable moment came when Nick interrupted a private conversation between Bill Hader and another guest. He repeated the same robotic questions, ignoring Hader's attempts to defuse the situation. When Hader gently asked him to give them space, Nick just stood there, silent, motionless, eyes locked, before turning abruptly and storming off. The tension in the room spiked instantly. Conversations quieted, glances shifted toward the exit where Nick disappeared, and the once lively party suddenly felt uneasy. What began as a festive night of laughter now carried an invisible weight.
I messed up today at 6 o'clock. I was supposed to get on, but I forgot I was doing the stuff.
You were supposed to what?
For my test.
Oh, you forgot to sign up?
At 6 o'clock today, and I tried to go see if there's any time available for 7, and they already took them all.
Oh, no.
I forgot.
So Friday gone too? You can't?
I gotta work. Only day I have is Saturday, remember?
Damn.
Because nobody else can go. I forgot. I don't know what I was doing with it. I put a reminder in my phone and everything. I don't even know why it didn't go off. I put a reminder in my phone last week and it didn't even go off.
Damn.
Look, I had
A sense that something wasn't right. As the night went on, the air at Conan's house never quite returned to its cheerful rhythm. Guests tried to shake off the unease, but whispers about Nick spread through the room like static. Michelle tried to smooth things over, smiling and chatting politely, though she kept glancing toward the hallway, clearly worried. Rob, ever the protective father, followed Nick discreetly from a distance, trying not to cause a scene. Nick, meanwhile, seemed lost in a fog. He drifted between rooms, the living area, the back patio, the bar, muttering to himself and sipping from a drink he never seemed to finish. Witnesses later described him as detached, confused, even haunted. At one point, Rob reportedly approached him near the kitchen, gently placing a hand on his shoulder. "Hey buddy, you okay?" someone nearby overheard. Nick didn't answer. He just stared straight ahead, tense, before quietly walking away again. By 10 p.m., the party was in full swing, but for the Reiners, the tension had reached its peak. Michelle reportedly told a close friend that she wanted to leave soon because Nick wasn't doing well. A few guests, including Larry David and Bill Hader, noticed Rob and Michelle whispering in the corner, trying to decide whether to call it a night. Then an argument broke out. Not loud enough to stop the music, but noticeable enough that those nearby exchanged awkward looks. One insider later claimed that Nick accused his parents of talking about him behind his back, his voice sharp and angry. Rob tried to calm him down, saying, "Let's just go home," but Nick pushed past him, knocking over a small table of drinks in the process. Security stepped in, and Conan, trying to de-escalate downplay the situation, approached with concern. "It's okay, let's get some air," he reportedly said. The group eventually made their way toward the exit, with Michelle clutching Rob's arm, her face pale with embarrassment and fear. Outside, the December air was crisp and silent compared to the warmth inside the party. Rob guided Nick toward their car, trying to reason with him, while Michelle stood back a few feet, visibly shaken. Witnesses said Nick's hands were trembling as he argued, pacing near the driveway. He shouted something incoherent before finally getting into the car, slamming the door behind him. The Reiners left quietly after that, cutting their night short. For many, it was just an uncomfortable moment, the kind of thing people hoped would blow over. But for Rob and Michelle, that drive home would mark the beginning of their final hours. According to later investigations, neighbors in Brentwood reported hearing muffled voices and faint arguing around midnight. Some thought it was just a late-night discussion between family members, nothing unusual for a weekend night. But by morning, the Reiner home would become the center of a crime scene that shocked Hollywood. Police pieced together what likely happened after the family returned home. The drive was tense. Nick, still agitated, reportedly accused his parents of humiliating him in front of their friends. Rob tried to defuse the situation, telling him to calm down and rest. But once inside the house, the confrontation escalated again. Forensic specialists believe that at some point between midnight and dawn, Nick entered the master bedroom where his parents were sleeping. Whether it was fueled by anger, confusion, or a breakdown, no one knows for sure. What followed was described by investigators as an extreme act of violence, leaving behind a scene too graphic to fully detail in public reports. What made the case even more disturbing was how ordinary the evening had begun. Friends said Rob and Michelle had been optimistic about Nick's progress. They believed his recent therapy sessions and medication were helping. Rob had even been talking about a new creative project for the two of them, something to give Nick purpose again. They had no reason to expect what was about to happen. By the next afternoon, when their bodies were discovered, the industry was stunned. News spread across social media instantly. First as rumored, then as confirmed reports. Tributes poured in from stars and fans around the world. Many couldn't comprehend how such a beloved Hollywood family could be torn apart overnight. In the days that followed, the focus turned to Nick, his mental health, his addiction, and the warning signs people might have missed. Old interviews resurfaced, showing glimpses of his struggles with identity and pressure. Some recalled how he'd once said in an interview, "I feel like I was born into a spotlight I never wanted." That quote now echoed with painful irony. Investigators continued to gather evidence, including surveillance footage, forensic samples, and witness statements from Conan's party. The timeline became clearer. Nick's erratic behavior earlier that evening, the argument, the sudden departure, and his arrival at the hotel hours later, everything fit together with chilling precision. But even as the evidence mounted, questions lingered about motive, about responsibility, about the limits of love. How could someone raised with so much support, surrounded by care and opportunity, reach a breaking point so extreme? Psychologists interviewed by various outlets called it a perfect storm of untreated trauma, addiction, and emotional volatility. Meanwhile, the entertainment industry grappled with its own guilt. Many insiders admitted that they'd seen Nick's instability over the years, at events, on sets, in social circles, but had dismissed it as Hollywood eccentricity. Now, it was impossible to ignore. As the trial date approached, producers who had worked with Rob issued heartfelt statements. Actors who had shared the screen with him described the loss as beyond comprehension. Friends of Michelle, who had always been known for her warmth and kindness, were devastated. She always believed he'd get better, one longtime friend said quietly. That's what makes it so unbearable. Even Conan O'Brien, who rarely comments on private matters, released a brief statement expressing his sorrow and disbelief, saying his heart was with the Reiner family and everyone affected by the tragedy. Now, nearly a year later, the case continues to dominate headlines. Every new court filing, every new piece of evidence reignites the debate over.
Yeah, man, sad and tragic. So drop some comments. Let me know what y'all think about this case. Y'all think Nick's guilty, or is he insane, or how do you think it's gonna go?